last many, many years. Anyway, his achievements are included in the bulletin for this week and also for last week. So that shows some measure when you have to have two editions of one done. Anyway, but it's not my intention to go through them one by one, but if you have not read them, I would commend that you do so. Now, Fraser also is very keen on an active sport and he exercises very regularly. Anyway, he has two highlights in his career in that way. He and his son in 2004 went to Papua New Guinea and they did the Kokoda Trail walk. More recently, he and his wife Kelly have completed the walk for the Hyson Trail, which, as you know, is all in South Australia and it's 1,200 kilometres long. So it takes a while to do that. Anyway, but apart from that, Fraser also has time and devotes time to the members of the community who require special assistance. And in that way, he was on the committee of the Spark Disability Foundation, and he was chairman of that for 7 years. Members will remember at our last meeting in the Adelaide Oval that a cheque was presented to the Salvation Army, and Fraser was the co-chair of that committee. So, without further ado, I now ask Fraser to address you.
Thank you for that introduction, Ivan. You're right about the contribution of the Adelaide Rotary Club towards the Ingle Farm appeal, redevelopment appeal, the Salvation Army appeal. The last time, in fact, I was with you all was at the Adelaide Oval venue where the cheque was handed over, and we are deeply grateful for the contribution members of Adelaide Rotary have made towards that appeal. I'm also delighted to report that whilst we didn't reach our targeted amount of money to raise, it was sufficient to enable the Salvation Army to proceed with the redevelopment, and the redevelopment was completed, and it was completed about $1 million below the budgeted cost, which made up a significant part of the shortfall in the fundraising. And Chris Moore can testify that the actual facility is first rate because he, amongst others, was present at the opening of that facility last month. So thank you again. Different note, and Ivan's referred to my involvement in the oil and gas industry, and particularly in this state. And one of the most notable instances of my involvement in the industry was as Chief Executive of Sagasco Holdings, which by common consensus, whilst it's a fair while ago now, was an outstanding success. So, with mixed feelings, I acknowledge the contribution of the other Bob Thomas, the late J.R. Thomas, who was chairman of Sagasco Holdings. Bob very recently passed away. His funeral was last week, and I publicly acknowledge that my modest business achievements have been largely due to the magnificent mentoring I received from Bob Thomas, an outstanding person. Why? I'm going to speak today about energy. Why energy? Well, firstly, because Ivan Morris asked me to talk about energy. Secondly, because most of my experience has been in that industry. And thirdly, because I believe that energy is one of the most beneficial things for humankind. In fact, when you really think about it, it is one of three of the most important tangible aspects of human well-being, the other two being food and water. So I much enjoy talking about this subject because it is a thoroughly worthwhile thing to do. The format of my presentation will be in two parts. The first one is I'll outline some features of the three companies in which I'm involved at the moment. And out of those features draw some broader messages, if you like, about the energy industry, particularly in this country. And the second part will be, and this is heroic, perhaps in the extreme, and that is to give my view about the three most significant developments or changes underway or that have occurred in the global energy industry. The three companies in which I'm involved are firstly Investor Limited, secondly Horizon Oil Limited, and thirdly Tarak Australia. Let's deal with them one by one. Investor Limited, stock exchange listed company, a couple of $1 billion market capitalisation, Australia's largest distributor of natural gas. It has 1.2 million customers, 23,000 kilometres of gas mains, in other words networks, and about 1,200 kilometres, about the distance of the Hyson Trail in fact, of transmission pipelines. One of the big issues that Investor has, and any organisation in that business, is the very substantial amounts of capital expenditure involved. For example, over the next 4 years, we expect that Investor will spend $1 billion on capital expenditure. Of that, about half will be to replace ageing cast iron gas mains, and the other half will be mainly on extending the connection and the scope and coverage of the network. That gives you an idea, just one little idea, about the very large sums that are involved. Now, gas distribution is, of course, a natural monopoly, so Investor's operations are nearly completely regulated, understandably. And one of the key things there is for the regulator to take decisions that get the balance right between short and long-term consumer interests, and on the one hand, and on the other hand, to provide a rate of return and allow sufficient capital expenditure so that that capital expenditure, which I referred to earlier, can be made viably. Because unless it can be made viably, it won't happen, and if it doesn't happen, we'll have the sorts of problems that affect networks elsewhere where all sorts of terrible things can happen. Fortunately, the Australian Energy Regulator in recent years has recognised the importance of the long-term interests of consumers and has provided rates of return which, whilst they aren't quite right, are nevertheless responsible in that they are encouraging substantially increased level of capital expenditure, which I just referred to. The second company I'll mention briefly is Horizon Oil Limited. Horizon is a stock exchange listed company, market capitalisation of about $400 million. It's in upstream oil and gas exploration, development and production. Its head office is in Sydney. It has no operations in Australia. Its operations are, and I'll deal with them one by one, firstly in New Zealand, where Horizon has a 10% interest in a producing oil field known as the Maari oil field. It's an oil field of about 60 million barrels of oil, and to get that into perspective, and it cost $1 billion to develop that oil field. Is that right, Brian? That would be about right. And to get that into perspective, the world is consuming about 87 million barrels of oil a day. So it's cost $1 billion to develop an oil field which, is, if it was the only source of oil for the world, would be gone by about 5 p.m. in the afternoon in one day. Gives you an idea just the scope and size of the investment that's required to develop energy resources. Next is the 27% interest in a producing offshore China oil field. It started producing only 2 months ago. It's in the Beibu Gulf of offshore China. It's currently producing at about 10,000 barrels a day, and the project to get to that point cost about $300 million. What's notable about that project is that it came in on budget and on time, and with an impeccable safety record. It is a really, truly successful project, and it runs counter to some of the conventional wisdom, certainly about doing things in China, particularly onshore China, and dealing with the, I guess, the bureaucracy and perhaps even the corruption in the provinces. This was a wonderful, very successful experience. And talking about bringing a project in on budget and on time, I contrast it with the experience in the Australian oil and gas industry over the last 10 years, as reported by RISC, R-I-S-C. RISC are one of Australia's leading technical advisory, corporate advisory groups. And they report that over the last 10 years, the average cost overrun of Australian oil and gas projects has been 44%. And they are averaging 7 months behind schedule. So I'll leave that with you. The third area of activity of Horizon Oil is PNG. And in PNG, which is Horizon Oil's growth area. The first two are producing oil fields. They are very successful projects, and PNG has major resources of natural gas and of condensate, our areas in PNG rather, and we are in the process of seeking to develop them. We have a licence area of about 8,000 square kilometres. We have certified gas and condensate resources of about 120 million barrels of oil equivalent. Most of that is gas. And we have applied for and expect to receive a licence to develop part of that within the next few months. What's it like doing business in PNG? Well, it's true. Corruption is very real. By Prime Minister Peter O'Neill's own admission, corruption is widespread. He's also publicly stated on numerous occasions that he is determined to do whatever he can to eliminate it. But nevertheless, it remains real. Secondly, physical violence and crime is bordering on lawlessness in the cities, especially in Port Moresby. And thirdly, whilst perhaps most nations suffer from bureaucratic inertia, that inertia and I've got to say incompetence in PNG is very serious. They're the downsides. The most significant upside about dealing with PNG is on the question of sovereign risk. And as a resource investor, the biggest single danger for the success of a project is that after you have invested millions of dollars, by unilateral legislation, the government of the J changes the rules in a way that adversely affects your returns on that project. And I can give specifics of at least 12 major cases in Australia where that has occurred. And of course, the Rudd government's attempt to introduce a super profits tax without consultation is just one example of the sort of thing that has gone on and hopefully, or not hopefully, hopefully won't go on in the future. There has not been one sovereign risk breach in PNG. Difficult to negotiate the arrangements, particularly the fiscal take of landowners and the government. But having negotiated the deal, that's it. They stick by it. I want to make that point because it's very significant and another contrast and perhaps defies conventional wisdom about some places. Now, lastly, Tarak. Tarak has been around for 83 years. It basically processes grape marc from wineries. In other words, the skins, seeds, stalks that are left over after the grapes are crushed in wineries. Tarak processes about 120,000 tonnes a year of grape marc, which is 80%, close to 80% of the wine grape crush in this country. Makes a variety of products from it, but mainly by a process involving washing it with steam and then a distillation process. The main product is grape spirit or grape alcohol and a range of grape spirits. From zero exports 15 years ago, we now export about 80% of our production and increasingly to Europe. The French brandy made with Tarak spirit is a wonderful thing to come to mind. It's an energy-intensive activity. Indeed, about 30% of Tarak's production costs are gas, natural gas. $4 million a year. We have formed the view, based on highly credible advice, and I don't think Graham Bethune's with us all today, but his expert advice, that we can expect very significant increases in natural gas prices in this state over the next few years. So one of the big challenges for the Taraks of this world is how do you respond to that? So we've spent a lot of time and effort developing a biomass process whereby we have boilers and we boil the mark that's left over to create our own steam. 3 issues. Ivan is approaching. And I won't be able to spell them out. The 3 significant issues are, firstly, the development of the shale oil and gas industry in the United States. It has dramatically changed, not just the outlook for the United States, but the global energy outlook. Indeed, I'm of the view, and many share it, that the shale gas and oil development in North America is the greatest development in global energy since OPEC was formed nearly 50 years ago. Secondly, continued energy efficiencies. Over 70% of the growth in demand for energy over the next 20 or 30 years will be met by continuation of the efficiencies in the use of energy fuels to create energy. And the third one is the growth of the LNG industry, which has dramatically changed access to gas from nations around the world. I'm privileged to have been involved and still be involved in the energy industry. And I've got to say it's a bonus that one of my activities is also heavily energy dependent, and it is in the wine industry. Thank you.
Thank you indeed, Fraser. Now, would the members like to ask Fraser any questions? If I do so now. Yes, please.
Fraser, thanks for that address. To what extent do you think the shale oil situation in the United States offsets all the peak oil sort of advocates just before the GFC?
Let's talk about oil. I mean, I think the great significance about shale in North America is that it's got every possibility of really creating self-sufficiency in energy in North America. Already, North America has turned around from being a likely major importer of natural gas to now the 3rd project was approved last week for the actual export of natural gas. And that's as a result of shale gas. Secondly, I think it's this year, it's expected that oil in North America will, for the first time in I think 30 years, actually increase. Now, that's not going to, the difference there will be very significant for North America. But what's also happening is there are still major discoveries being made of oil, and there will be increased use, instead of traditional crude oil, of what's known as natural gas liquids. In other words, hydrocarbon liquids that are associated with gas. So peak oil to me is, forget it, not an issue.
Yes,
Thank you for that extremely interesting address. Looking in the context of the world, what's the potential for all the energy sources in South America, Russia, China, etc.?
The potential, well, I guess, I hope I'm not an unrealistic optimist, but I am near overwhelmed by the success of this this technology to unleash or allow these reserves of shale gas and oil in the United States. They were previously just uneconomic, and the techniques involved are just mind-blowing. I mean, horizontal drilling, you drill down from a platform from which you can drill half a dozen wells instead of having to have half a dozen separate sites, so you drill down vertically. Now, and Maari Oilfield's an example, where one of these wells was drilled down, it went down 1 kilometre, and then they angled the drill bit 7 kilometres horizontally, and it came out within 1 metre of the spot it was supposed to come out. It is just, now, I expect there'll be further technological developments that will unearth, and deep water drilling. I mean, years ago, it was just impossible to contemplate the depth to which, for example, oil's been found in the Gulf of Mexico. So, look, I'm optimistic. It will be found. It will cost more, however.
Yes, John, Mr. Barnes.
So, we read reports, read in the paper that Australian gas supplies are being exported all over the world, and yet there's not going to be enough gas for Australian users because of the export all over the world. The contract's been signed up. Would you enlarge on that, please?
Well, it's a big issue. I don't have long to, because I have to finish in 2 minutes. But I'm confident the gas is there. We have the gas. But the question is what the price will be. The way to respond to that outlook is not to reserve gas and say you can't export it. You've got to reserve it for domestic supply, because if you do that, that will reduce the exploration effort. And in my view, the best way to see there is enough gas and it is priced competitively is to increase supply of gas and allow the market to work.
Thank you, Fraser. Members, could you please stand now as I make a presentation of